13, Nancy and Ellie return home. Manal was waiting in the arbor at my house. The slight dampness in the pale night air intensified the scent of flowers. I got us hot drinks and biscuits, and we sat down comfortably. Titch laid his great head in Manal's lap. I realized this was a great honor. "Now you've met other surface dwellers who have come here and want to stay," began the man with the long, nearly white hair. "Just like you, they have had certain experiences which have brought them here. People from Earth don't end up here by accident. It wasn't by accident that your ship went down and you were saved. Neither was it an accident that Lex came to us. He had known about us for a long time. However, Nancy isn't particularly welcome. We knew she wouldn't fit in here, but we gave her a chance because she is your friend. It hasn't gone well. I have talked to her, and she's returning to the surface via Mount Shasta tomorrow. We'll provide financial help, as she couldn't get home otherwise." "It's not what Ellie wants," I sighed. "But she can always return when she's older, if she doesn't forget us. We've decided it's your duty to go with them, Tim." I guess I looked far from delighted, for he began laughing. "You only need put them on the first flight to Seattle. Then you can return immediately, if you're not tempted to stay a while on Earth, that is." I shook my head firmly, and he laughed again. "We'll wake you in plenty of time tomorrow. Go to Nancy's, and there will be a hovercraft there. Nancy will be taking precious stones with her, so she'll manage financially. Arniel wants to see you as soon as you get back, so contact me at once. Have a good trip." With a smile, he hugged me and disappeared out the door. When I looked around, he was gone. In the morning, I was awakened by a small bird chirping like a canary on my shoulder. I got dressed and hurried to Nancy's house. Nancy was sitting outside on her suitcase, and Ellie was on the grass, tears streaming down her face. Titch sat down beside the girl and looked as if he was trying to comfort her. She buried her head in his huge doggy neck. I lifted her gently into the hovercraft. Nancy inclined her head slightly in my direction and asked, "Are you coming with us?" "Only as far as the plane." She got into the vehicle, and I sat in front. She avoided looking at me, and I hoped the whole journey would be over quickly. "I had expected you to be more honorable," remarked Nancy. "I never believed my husband's best friend would be so unreliable." Honestly, I was astonished. "How am I unreliable?" I asked. "First you came on to me, and then, as soon as we came here, you cast me aside for that blonde tart. You know, that woman you danced with. I was brought here under false pretenses. I feel betrayed. This isn't paradise. It's just the opposite." "You'll probably find you brought that with you," I retorted, suppressing my anger. "Haven't you learned the 7 virtues, which I've repeated to you every day? We live by them in this country. Appreciation, compassion, forgiveness, humility, understanding, valor, and unconditional love, of course." Ellie came out with this line. I thought she'd drifted off next to Titch. My dog made a talking noise, one of those dog mumbles which most dog owners would recognize. "And that doesn't include jealousy," I added, "especially as I've never encouraged you." "That was your interpretation." Nancy didn't have time to reply, because the craft landed at the enormous station I described earlier. We drove along a track into a tunnel. Ellie put her arms around Titch, but he was sitting bolt upright, staring into the darkness. There were small, weak lamps on the tunnel walls, and I could see Nancy's rigid face, her mouth drooping. Then she put her hand on my arm. "Can't you forgive me, so things will be like they were before?" she asked. "Then I can come and visit you sometime. I'm rich now, thanks to your generous friends." "Getting back here won't be as easy as you think," I replied grimly. "You were here thanks to me, and won't be able to return unless I wish it. That's how it works." Nancy was silent for the rest of the journey, while Ellie chattered about all her experiences. But she was happy to be getting home to their old house and her friends. They would never believe her stories. As we got out of the hovercraft, she chirruped, "Soon I'll be able to ring Garth and Linny and Polly and on our phone. And Mom will drive us on trips in the summer." The heavy gate reverberated with a hollow clang behind us as we climbed the stairway to Mount Shasta. Outside, in the parking lot, was a taxi. The driver approached and called out my name. The taxi was pre-booked and would drive us straight to the airport. We got in. I'll never forget Nancy's last words to me. I held out my hand and was going to give her a friendly hug, but she pulled away and stood on the bottom step to the airplane. "I hate you, Tim," she declared gravely. "I'm going to get my revenge and really hurt you. I'm going to do my best to stop Ellie ever returning here. I despise you, Timothy." I didn't believe Nancy for a moment. She had a quick temper. But it didn't feel good. I reached down and patted Big Titch on the head. He licked my hand and I felt better at once. Dogs aren't just our best friends, they're more than that. They are our conscience, good or bad, and they lick away our troubles before they can grow worse, and their loyal faces bring us strength and courage. Titch and I returned to Telos without any further trouble, and I went straight to grandmother's house. Lex was there, of course, and Edmund, while Wendy and her cousin Pierre were chasing each other in the beautiful, little garden. It was lovely and restful, hearing happy children and joyful laughter. Titch went off to join in at once. Lex laughed when he heard about my disagreeable leave-taking from Nancy. "Don't worry about that woman, she can't hurt you here, Tim," he said. "Forgive her, and pray that she gets the help she needs. Let go of all your thoughts about her. Transmit light and love to replace the bad. Remember that evil can't survive light, so transmit plenty of light." I already know all of this, but it never hurts to be reminded of good things, of the proximity of the great light. We Earthlings find this easy to forget. When I returned home, Arniel and Mantle were waiting in the little arbor in my garden. I didn't bother to tell them about Nancy, I realized they already knew. "Forget Nancy and the surface and all the unpleasant things you have experienced," said Arniel. "We have other tidings. First, you are going on a trip with your grandmother and the others, and Mantle is going with you as guide. It will be quite a long journey, because you need to know more about our land if you are going to stay here. It will be good for the children, too. Ellie ought to have stayed, as we need gifted children like her. But I think she will return, and maybe you will have to collect her, Tim. But that is for the future. When this trip is over, we would like you to operate as a bridge between the surface and here. You will be informed later what this will involve. But I can promise you plenty of exciting and instructive adventures. You will meet many people because you have much of the Earthling still in you, which we need to preserve, as it is so positive. There is an acquaintance you will be making soon, which will be especially important and instructive for all of us. 14. Meeting Saint Germain. We were back in a hovercraft, Mantle, grandmother, and I, with Titch, Lex, Wendy, Edmund, and Pierre. Only Lex knew where we were going. In actual fact, grandmother and I knew very little about Agartha as a country and Telos as a town. We hadn't had much time to be tourists. Mantle turned to smile at me, while the children pretended to be scared as we reached hover height, which seemed to be just above the trees at the moment. Sometimes, hover height was a few inches above the ground, but apparently we were going further, so the hovercraft flew like an aircraft. We were tightly strapped in, luckily. I shared with the children my feeling that this was an enchanted journey, and they loved the idea. There were huge birds flying in formation, well away from us. Smaller birds flew around us, chirping all the time. Finally, we were coming down. Fear gave way to excitement. Where were we? We landed in lush, green, fairly tall grass, which grows all over Agartha. Mantle jumped out quickly and offered a gentlemanly hand to my grandmother before the other men got out. I looked around. Was it a South Sea island? There were palms all around, between which we glimpsed a sea as blue as the Mediterranean. "We're going to meet someone here," Mantle remarked. "He and I are going to divide you between us and guide you around. He's visiting Agartha and has been here a while. He's from another dimension, but has asked to come here, much for the sake of Mariana, the medium who Tim will be in contact with. Look, here he is." A tall, elegant man approached rapidly from a palm grove. I recognized his happy, open face, but I couldn't think why. He came up to me, took both my hands, smiled with sparkling teeth, and embraced me. Then he hugged the other men. Imagine my surprise when he kissed grandmother's hand. She looked delighted. He crouched down to joke with the children, and even Titch was patted thoroughly without any objections. The dog licked him as if he was an old friend. I recognize you, observed grandmother, regarding him with a raised eyebrow. Are you an author, or an actor? Are you British or Swedish? None of those, he replied with a smile. I'm Saint Germain, and I visit Agartha occasionally. They call me Master. I come from the stars, and was incarnated on earth as a spiritual teacher, long before Jesus Christ. I made appearances in France in the reign of Louis XIV. I'm a spiritual leader to many who live now, and here is one of my loyal pupils, as large as life, this little lady who is asking who I am. Grandmother! I exclaimed. Manel took the newcomer aside and appeared to receive instructions. Then, with a wave and a bow, Manel disappeared. The great master returned to us. I know where we're going now, he commented. We'll take the hovercraft a little further. In this part of the planet, there are obviously long distances, but there are also ways and means of shortening them. The hovercraft seemed to have a variety of speeds, and now it raced forward a few inches from the ground. When it stopped, the landscape had completely changed. We were at the foot of a fire-spewing volcano. The fire didn't pour downwards, but instead disappeared upwards into a dark cloud. At the great foot of the volcano was a village. There were the typical Agarthan buildings, round, roofless houses surrounded by luxuriant vegetation. Grandmother clasped her hands together, as was her habit, and cried, "How splendid! How impressive! How can they build so close to a volcano? Imagine if there was an eruption, like Vesuvius." Lex guffawed. Emily, dearest, this is Vesuvius. At least, that's what it's called on the surface, and we are just beneath Italy. Volcanoes erupt upwards here, not downwards. Grandmother stared at him. How do you know these things, Lex? She wondered, and the rest of us burst out laughing. Then we turned around to watch the amazing sight. I thought you were considered a magician, as there was no corpse in your coffin, but you seem very much alive, I remarked to Saint Germain. He laughed heartily. Where I come from, you can appear in various guises, as necessary, he replied. That is possible here, too, but not in Telos, another part of Agartha. The fifth dimension is an ascendancy there, invisible to humans. This region has much ancient wisdom and history, which I'm interested in. I like gaddying about an ancient history. I feel oddly at home in it. But let's continue with this tour. Just then, we heard a scream, followed by another scream. Wendy was running towards us. Pierre has drowned in the volcano, she screamed. He's all sooty. It was our turn to run now. The master, with his long legs, arrived first, to find an amorphous blob of coal dust, spitting and hissing like an angry cat. It was not a laughing matter, but it was very comical. Pierre was trying to balance on the edge over there, Wendy explained. Then he slipped, and I had to pull him out, and Titch helped. He took Pierre's pullover in his teeth and pulled. My handsome dog turned up covered in soot too. Saint Germain took over now. This is something I have learned down the eons of time, he said, standing in front of the mucky boy and the sputtering dog. Titch's coat was black anyway, so now it was difficult to see where the soot ended and his nose began. The ancient master was before them, raising his hands and muttering. A black cloud lifted from the child and the dog. It disappeared into the sky, leaving the boy and dog to be hugged by everyone. Wendy was at my side, holding my hand. I should have rolled in it too, she said thoughtfully. Then I would have got lots of hugs too. I gave her a huge bear hug in reply. We continued in the hovercraft. So you come from heaven? I smiled at the interesting newcomer. He smiled back. I don't think you really know who I am. My mission is to visit the 3-dimensional part of Agartha, temporarily, from the 5-dimensional part. Our new inhabitants, yourself included, Tim, must be incorporated easily with our original inhabitants. You people in this hovercraft constitute newcomers, as there are great swathes of our continent you are not yet familiar with. The children will learn about it in school, but you must experience the country naturally. I have lived in and visited other dimensions before settling where I am. Telos is part of the area I am responsible for, though there are many others. There are plenty of wise masters here, but I am in charge of movement and organization for innovation. In Telos I have a physical body, but not in the other areas of Agartha. Now, let's get to know the outskirts of Telos. The hovercraft was coming down. A massive, round building caught our attention. There was a soft humming in the air, as if from 1,000 bumblebees. Turning around, we found a similar building behind us, and one to either side. We were ringed by massive, roofless buildings. A lot of manufacturing takes place here, called Lex. We make food and drink in one of these buildings, furniture and interior products in another. These are businesses you have on the surface in a different form. The children might be interested in the sweets. Run through that green door there, Wendy and Pierre, and someone will look after you. The children didn't need to be told twice, they disappeared immediately through the green door. The rest of us, including Titch, were taken on a voyage of discovery we won't forget for a long time. Everything was made by hand or using very simple tools, not machines. There was a holy heap of stuff, implements of all kinds. When we emerged from the building, the children were waiting by the hovercraft, chewing and sucking, obviously pleased with themselves. We were incredibly impressed and surprised at the variety of things which could be produced without machinery. I have been an escapist all of my life, and have been seeking only the search itself, declared my petite grandmother as we sat down in our unique vehicle. I'm glad the search is over. This is where I want to grow old. You won't grow old here, you'll get younger, explained Saint Germain. Aging is an above-earth process, and actually completely unnecessary. Look at Tim. He's been here for many Earth years, and still looks just as he did when he first came. This is how it will be with you, too. Much has been written of my youthful appearance, which never seemed to age. I live a wholesome life here, and know about youth and health. The children have to grow up first, but we can help Emily and the men to become younger. There are houses like the ones you see here, which offer various treatments for visitors who decide to stay. We continued our strange journey. "15 Magical buildings." It was lunchtime, or perhaps dinner time. As time didn't exist and the sun wasn't like the one on Earth, it was difficult to determine anything, except that our stomachs were rumbling. Lex took us into land in a village outside Telos, near a cafe. We sat down, and after making sure the hungry children had food, ordered some for us. How do we pay? I haven't seen anyone produce a wallet since we came. No notes, no coins? It was grandmother who pointed this out. Here payment is different, began Lex. In kind? Grandmother interrupted, eyes glittering with lurking laughter. I'm too old for that. Grandmother. I remonstrated. There's no money on Telos, just service. We provide for each other, exchange goods, and waste nothing. There are collection areas for exchange, instead of shops. It's well organized, as you will see. Grandmother was visibly enjoying a delicious cake. The children were cramming in everything on offer. Food is necessary for survival, Saint Germain smiled and said. It's provided in Agartha. On the surface, nothing is provided without payment, remarked Edmund. That kind of difference is like chalk and cheese. We continued our hovercraft journey into the unknown. Next time we landed, we were taken by surprise. We were on a mountainside, near an amazing building. It was more oval than round, and glittered with precious stones. It had a greenish glow, the Jade Temple, explained Saint Germain. It wasn't in any particular style, this temple. It was like a fairy tale castle with towers and pinnacles, more decorative afterthoughts than necessities. It was very beautiful. "You have churches," he commented as we alighted. "We have buildings for meditation. You can enjoy a moment of contemplation whenever you wish. Let's go in." We were so fascinated by the exterior of the temple that it was difficult to drag ourselves away to go inside. It was unlike anything we had seen before, glinting and gleaming as if alive. "I've always been interested in UFOs," declared Edmund, who had previously said very little. "This reminds me of an inverted UFO somehow. It's how you would imagine another planet, and yet we're still here on Earth. It's very weird." "There are plenty of weird things here," observed Lex cheerfully, gesturing for us to enter the magnificent, jewel-studded door. "The pearly gate," I thought, smiling. Inside was exquisite. The precious stones covering the walls cast a dull, shimmering gleam across the hall. There were plenty of comfortable couches and chairs upholstered in a velvet-like material. People were sitting, lost in meditation, or just resting, and we found our way to two sofas facing each other. The children realized they had to be calm and quiet, and seemed bewitched. They sat with their eyes closed and hands clasped. I knew these buildings were known as houses of God's love and were thousands of years old. There was something magical about them which words can't express. Music was playing softly, and there was something aromatic which intensified the atmosphere, rather than otherwise. I shut my eyes and lost myself in it. It wasn't long before a man and woman were standing in the middle of the room. They talked to us telepathically. There were no voices, but they talked in turn, clearly, in our heads. They both were tall and well-built. The woman's hair was long and fair, the man's long and raven black. They were dressed in kaftan-like robes, with glittering edging and embroidery, the woman in pink and the man in green. "Welcome to the house of God's love," said the man, in English, at least that's the language I heard. "In this haven of tranquility, your thoughts can cease their frantic dance and you can allow feelings and impressions to take over. It's time to look inwards at who you are. You may not be who you think you are," the clear female voice declared. "Be honest with yourselves. You children will find a story and sweets waiting behind the curtain over there." The children disappeared at once. The telepathic speech continued with the male voice. "You are newcomers, and very welcome. I want to explain some special attributes of the area of Mother Earth where you are now. If you still believe that the Earth is solid and you're dreaming, I can relieve you of your delusion. Both the North and South poles converge in an enormous inner cavity with its own sun and beautiful surroundings, where people can live in great well-being with an ancient culture. Our capital city is Shambhala," the female voice took up the tale. "It's in the center of the planet. Our energy is free and inexhaustible. Our inhabitants travel by hovercraft, as you have done, because we wish to conserve nature and allow it to grow naturally. A tunnel system across the whole planet has formed a well-planned communications network for centuries. Energy comes from crystals hooked up to electromagnetism, which will last 500,000 years. The Earth's crust is approximately 800 miles, 1,300 kilometers, thick," the man continued. "The magnetic field of Earth has always been a mystery to scientists on the surface. Our inner sun in the center of the Earth is the mysterious power source which generates the magnetic field around our planet. Nowadays, there are entrances to Agartha across the whole planet," interrupted the woman, laughing. "We can stay in contact, as long as you know we exist." "We know you do, anyway. There was an entrance in the Library of Alexandria, which burned down in 47 BCE. There are millions of us here, but in the last 200 years we have only accepted 50 people from the surface." The man added, "You have visited our immense library, Porthologos, albeit somewhat briefly. It is actually under the Aegean Sea. It is enchanted, literally. It is the seat of learning, a world university, the stronghold of magic, a center for the arts, and much, much more. A surface lifetime would not give you enough time to research all its secrets, but we live for hundreds of years, so we get more opportunity to study them." "You're interested in our inhabitants, aren't you?" the woman asked, and we nodded. We are similar to you, but taller. Good food and fine thoughts keep us youthful and extend our lives. We have been vegetarians for 12,000 years. This is good for our figures. We'll teach you. We are planning to come to the surface and offer help. The schedule is not definite yet, but your need grows more urgent. We already have informers up there. We could carry on for hours, observed the man. But we're not going to. We want you to experience our vast continent for yourselves, not by reading about it or flying through it briefly. You ought to know in advance that Telos and its district are the only part where surface dwellers feel really at home. There are huge unexplored forests, fields, mountains, and seas that cover great parts of Agartha. You'll recognize much of the flora and fauna. We have many towns which are 5-dimensional, which you'll have to learn before you can go there. You'll spend plenty of time in Porthologos, and will travel around, too. As the newest group from the surface, we would like you all to study Agartha together. We are honored that our respected friend and master, Saint Germain, is with you, and we will do all we can to ensure you have a comfortable journey. You can take the lift from here to Porthologos, the woman informed us. Lex will show you the way. You'll need to take the children with you, as there is a kind of school where they can stay and learn, while you explore Agartha. The practicalities of your trip are all arranged. What you learn from it is up to each of you individually. Will it be dangerous? My grandmother asked delicately. You may sometimes experience danger, but remaining positive and transmitting love and happiness will protect you. You may meet life forms that you don't recognize and elementals who know nothing of life on the surface. Fear is unacceptable. You must suppress your fear and even your anger, unless it is just. You'll see what I mean. The man nodded and smiled. We're only here to prepare you. Nobody can come and live here without being tested. We dare not take any risks with people from the surface. However, most people who don't fit in realize it themselves, and decide not to stay. Tim is already one of us, but you could say that he's sanctioning his citizenship by accompanying Emily, Lex, and Edmund. The master travels where he wants, and you might need him. So there you are. Your new life starts now. End of section 15. If you find this audiobook useful, please subscribe to my channel, Rapid Reads.